Welcome back to another show of Ask the Doctors. Now, honestly, we've had such great feedback from so many people that have been watching at home and also getting their questions in. I mean, if you have the opportunity to ask, why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? So we're going to get cracking straight away.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Dan, for joining us. So we've had a message come through from Rose asking about type 2 diabetes. So how does type 2 diabetes actually occur?
Very good question. Yeah, it's an interesting one actually, because when we try to find the answer for these things, you can go on things like the NHS website. You can go on a lot of these websites online. The popular kind of health websites, and what you'll get is an answer which is usually along the lines of type 2 diabetes is associated with obesity and it's associated with various other things and that, but you never really get a straight answer about what causes type 2 diabetes, what's going on in our lives that causes type 2 diabetes. Yes, there is a certain genetic element to it, okay? So there's a certain element that it runs in families. So if your parents had type 2 diabetes, you're certainly more likely and you're more predisposed to have type 2 diabetes, okay? So, but what is actually type 2 diabetes? It's a combination of two different things, and those two different things are insulin resistance. Insulin resistance is to do with the way your body handles insulin, okay? And you're literally becoming resistant to the effects that insulin has on your body. Now, insulin has lots of effects around your body, but one of its key roles is to get glucose from your blood into your cells where it's stored, okay? So it effectively prevents high blood glucose levels, because when your blood glucose level go up, your body triggers to produce insulin from the pancreas, and that comes out into the body around the bloodstream and helps that go into cells, okay? But your body becomes resistant, okay? So I'm going to compare that to like alcohol, okay? So your body, if you drink on a regular basis, you're less tolerant to alcohol, and so you need more alcohol to get drunk. So your body's becoming resistant to alcohol in those situations. It's very, very similar for something like morphine. We know that people who are taking morphine tablets or whatever form of morphine on a regular basis, or heroin, when we consider it as like a drug of abuse, need more and more to get the same pain-killing effects over time. So your body has this capacity to get used to the effects of something over time. And that's one of the things that's going on in diabetes, is your body is becoming resistant to the effects of insulin. And the second thing that's often going on in type 2 diabetes is your body has a reduced ability to produce as much insulin as it should be able to. So, and that's because of fat buildup within the pancreas itself, okay? And that's often thought to be due to excessive carbohydrates, particularly fructose, which is the fruit sugar, which is half of what we find in sucrose or table sugar. Very common in fizzy drinks and things like that, which is why those things are sugary fizzy drinks are very commonly thought to be a strong cause of type 2 diabetes. So yeah, we've got two different things. You've got insulin resistance and a reduced ability to produce insulin within the body, and we see there's lots of things that are associated with it, but we think things like exercise and that are probably part of the problem, and lack of exercise and stress and all these kind of things. But I think the key one thing that I'd have to put it down to in the majority of cases is sugar consumption.
Yeah, you'd say that's probably one of the main contributing factors. Yeah. It's interesting what you said there, actually, Dr. Dan, about most people would say, you think obesity would be the main sort of link, or everything. My mum and my dad both have type 2 diabetes, so it's something obviously I have to be a little bit aware of. Neither of them have a lot of weight on them at all, and my brother finds it quite difficult to understand. He's, especially with my mum, he's like, you're really quite slim, and yet you have, and she has really really quite bad type 2 diabetes. With my dad, again, very slim, but in all honesty, very sugary drinks over the years. He's had a lot of those, not eaten properly, lots of caffeine, lots of coffee, lots of sugary drinks, and now, you know, is essentially paying the price and trying to reverse it.
Yeah.
Actually, can I just jump in with a question?
Of course you can.
Is there other things that you can do to potentially reverse it or make it better?
Okay, so this is at the absolute heart of what we love to talk about here. So when I was training, you know, 5 years ago, when I was finishing off my general practice training, we still thought of type 2 diabetes as a progressive, worsening disease which could only really be managed with medication, okay? And it was about stopping it progressing and becoming, you know, having more and more medications over the life course in order to try and prevent it progressing. However, in the last few years, we've started to see many people reversing and effectively putting their type 2 diabetes into remission, often using low carbohydrate ketogenic diets, and this has become a very, very in thing to talk about in the type 2 diabetes community. Some excellent work being done by some people who we've been interviewing for Primal Cure, such as Dr. David Unwin, who I know is, we've got some information coming from him very soon. He's a GP up in Southport, and he has had excellent results with his type 2 diabetics on low carbohydrate diets and has seen excellent control and really given his patients a choice between, you know, lifelong medication and making dietary changes in order to address the type 2 diabetes. So yeah, there is a lot we can, you know, once people are diagnosed with type 2 diabetes, there is a lot that people can do. Now, I'm not saying that everybody with type 2 diabetes is going to be able to completely reverse their diabetes and not have medication, but there is a lot you can do in terms of lifestyle medicine to help with type 2 diabetes.
That's
definitely,
brilliant. Yeah, it's great to know that there are certain things that you could potentially do to improve your diabetes type 2, but ultimately, as we talk about on Primal Cure so often, the key is prevention, really.
It's very, it's very, very important, but actually reacting as early as possible really to do these things, because, you know, unless you do, you know, once you've got a problem processing the glucose within your body, you know, just adding more glucose in, which is, you know, what we do when we're eating even starchy carbohydrates like bread and pasta and rice and all those kind of things, it all breaks down to glucose at the end of the day. Then, you know, we're still essentially feeding that process, and actually, if you keep eating that way, it's very likely to be a progressive worsening disease. Similarly, like things like you know, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, which is a disease of usually smoking-induced disease, will continue to get worse if you continue to smoke. So there's lots to be done.
There's lots to be done. I might actually, with what you've just said there, might jump to the next question, because interestingly, we've actually had Jill message with regards to smoking. So Jill was asking, what is the best way to stop smoking?
Okay. So this is a tricky one. Okay, so the best way to stop smoking, I think, is different for everybody, and this just the same with, you know, how to change your lifestyle for the better. You know, how to establish a good sleeping pattern, how to establish a good diet. It's not going to be the same for every two people. So, you know, I'm really happy for people to start to think about how they do it in their own way, and we'll talk about some of the different points. But the first point is believe you can do it, okay? Even if you failed to stop smoking before, I think the average number of times that it takes for quitting smoking, relapsing, starting again, and going through that whole process is about 6 times before people actually give up smoking. I used to smoke myself. I'm not proud of it, but it is something that, you know, I did, and, you know, I gave up a number of times before I finally, you know, kicked the habit. And
So half of it is sticking to it, really. Just
half of it sticking to it, but also not punishing yourself if you have failed before. And we talked about with Steve a couple of weeks ago. You know, Steve describes it as you haven't quit smoking, you've escaped. which I think
interesting.
is a really,
I
really
like
nice
that.
way of going
Yeah.
about it.
No, as well, yeah, because it can take hold of you, essentially. So I suppose it is, considered an escape when you actually eventually are able to completely stop, which, like you say, it's not easy. So it's a case of don't be so necessarily hard on yourself, and that can make things worse. We're all about reducing stress as well here, and quitting smoking isn't going to be easy. If it was, then everyone would just be able to do it like that, So you've got to bear that in mind. Like you say, don't be so self-punishing, and everything's a process at the end of the day. It's a bit like and both yourself and Dr. Shan have talked about living a healthier lifestyle. It's not just going to happen overnight. You don't just click your fingers and then suddenly, I'm going to stop eating all that stuff I was eating before and stop this, stop that. Sometimes small steps will mean that ultimately you will make the changes, because half the time if you do something too big, too fast, too quickly, that's when you go back to your original habits.
Yeah. Actually, I think smoking is probably the exception.
Oh, really?
Because,
okay.
well, you're either a smoker or you're not a smoker, okay? And actually, well, for a lot of things, like in exercise, beginning to exercise and things like that, then you are, you can build these things up over time. But with smoking, I think it's very difficult to cut down smoking.
Yeah.
And actually, one of the things is make a plan. You'll make a plan of a stop date and stick to it. Okay, put it in your diary, make it known to your friends and family that is your stop date, and carry on from there. Okay, and you need to, as part of your plan, think beyond that. Think, what are going to be the difficult situations for you? Is it at work when your colleagues and yourself are going out for a cigarette break? Is it going to be at that party that we're coming up to Christmas party season and stuff? And if you're starting to think about giving up smoking now, it's going to be a tricky time. If you're going out to your Christmas parties and your colleagues that you're there with are giving up smoking. So you need to start thinking, how am I going to actually deal with that situation when I get there? How am I going to stay inside with the non-smokers, or am I going to go outside? And I think the one thing that gets a lot of people is, just have one drag. I'll just have one drag of that cigarette and that'll be it for me. But it's one of the big downfalls. So I think it's very important to have a no drag rule. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So it does vary, perhaps, to, as we talked about earlier, maybe diet you can do. Well, I mean, obviously, the more you can do, the better. But don't do everything too quickly with smoking. Like you say, it is different. Yeah, like you say, if you that one drag can turn into just having one cigarette, and then before you know it, you've had a pack, and then so on and so forth. There's lots of apps and so on out these days, aren't there? I've had friends and family that have used apps that really sort of congratulate you on how many days you've gone without it, and actually that's quite self-congratulating. It makes you feel good. And about the amount of money you're saving on cigarettes and stuff, and it's huge. And actually, everybody's motivations are different when they come to stop smoking. Some people, find it really helpful to remember the reasons why they've stopped smoking, whether it's to save money, whether it's because you've just become a parent for the first time and you don't want to smoke in front of your children, and you want to give yourself the best health choice possible, and actually maybe whenever you feel that you have a craving, you get a photo of your child out or something like that, really, in order to, but just whatever it works to remind you about why you're doing it. Okay, and this is why I say there's not one right path for everybody. Another thing is, identifying your triggers is, the association with when a lot of people like an after dinner cigarette, things like that. So, consider what you're actually going to do with your time if that's your certain habit. We also know that certain drinks make cigarettes more palatable. So,
really?
Yeah, so sugary drinks and stuff are thought to make smoking in that more nice, basically.
So what crave it, you're more likely to crave it when you've had a sugary drink? Or?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I'm not sure of the exact relationship, but it's that the cigarettes are seem to be more enjoyable at that point. So, you've got to, again, consider those to be one of the triggers, really. Yeah,
interesting. I really love the idea of, that you said about, having that goal in mind, and, when you feel like you perhaps struggling to stick to it and want to have one, or whatever, it doesn't just have to be related to smoking, whatever it may be, that you think, well, actually, I'm doing it for this reason, and keep reminding yourself, and that might help you stick to that. Can I also just say thank you so much for these questions. We've had some really fantastic ones come over the last few weeks. If you want to know how to continue getting in touch, so obviously we've got our questions for this show, but if you get your questions in, then for future shows, be it with Dr. Dan or Dr. Shan, we will try to get through to those, and always tune in at Monday at 6 p.m. If you go to the website, which is primalcure.com, scroll down to the bottom on the left hand side, there is a line that says Ask the Doctors. You see Dr. Dan there, and also Dr. Shan, and you can put your questions in. Now, we're not talking obviously medical emergencies. We are looking for health related questions.
We're looking at lifestyle things.
Questions.
A lot of the time, it's, we're looking at, if you've got an obvious symptom, then not very often we won't be able to, respond to that and say, you should definitely do X, Y, and Z. It's more of a case of discussing lifestyle stuff and what you can do, stuff that's going to be generally applicable to a lot of the people watching and stuff. Really, like the giving up smoking.
Absolutely, yeah. There'll be lots of people watching that will be like, do you know what, that's really interesting, and that relates to me in one way or another. Speaking of relating to somebody one way or another, the next question we've got here, I was very interested in when this came through. Lindsay has asked, does asthma ever go away? And perhaps heard me mention it before, but I've suffered quite badly with very severe and brittle asthma that's hospitalised me on numerous occasions. And I've been ventilated a number of times as well. But does it ever go away?
Are you better now?
But mine's controlled through.
There you go. She's answered the question.
This is yeah. There we go. Mine is controlled, and that is honestly a mix of lifestyle and medication. With that, is Lindsay perhaps asking about age maybe, or does it just ever?
Yeah, so very often it's, very young children, we won't diagnose asthma in very young children, but it starts to present 3, 4, 5 and through the younger ages and stuff, and it's very, very common for children to develop asthma, particularly if there's a strong family history, and it also comes in a cluster with things like eczema, hay fever and other allergies. It's all considered part of a same spectrum of illnesses, so it's not any surprise when these things come together and they hunt in packs, or maybe somebody in the family suffers with eczema and somebody else suffers with asthma, but there's often a very strong family link again with asthma. Do people get better from asthma? Some people do, some people don't. It's really, really variable. Some people just get better control of their asthma. Some people seem to grow out of their asthma. It's really, really difficult to know who that's going to be, really.
Yeah.
So, and the same with eczema, the same with hay fever. Most people have gotten over their hay fever by the time they hit their 30s, but some people go right through. And some people suffer with these conditions all their lives.
Yeah, interestingly, Elliot, our director, who's behind the scenes at this moment in time, Elliot, you suffered with asthma, didn't you, when you were younger, and now doesn't. My sister suffered with it very, very badly when she was younger, and again was hospitalised many times. Doesn't have it, now. So I suppose. I mean, is there something about 7-year cycles as well, or you can go in sort of age or year cycles? It can come and then go. It's amazing how that can occur.
I've not come across that, to be honest.
Yeah, I was talked about this. There's certain cycles, but again, it's really, really person dependent. I mean, someone once said to me, "Oh, you'll possibly grow out of it," and actually, I ended up getting a lot worse as I got older. Does exercise have an effect on asthma in a good or a bad way? Does it?
It's certainly, I believe it certainly can do. In terms of, there's lots of things that are in terms of kind of. A lot of things that have been said about kind of breath holding and breath control things, which I'm not sure how much they work when we really look at the evidence base for them, but exercise, and certainly it can really, really help. My very good friend who I go running with on a Saturday morning is asthmatic, and certainly I know he's experienced a considerable improvement in his asthma by going running, and it's actually very, very rare now that we have to stop as part of the run in order for him to have some of his inhaler and stuff. But
Brilliant.
because his breathing has really, really improved through asthma. Has it been something that's helped you? You mentioned some of the lifestyle changes you'd made.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, food and the sort of, I mean, there's certain exercises that I just haven't been able to do. And to be honest, for many, many years, I wasn't diagnosed with the sort of asthma that they now know that I have, which is very severe and brittle. And I was doing cross country. When I show, you know, I know some people might love it, but I'll be honest, I just thought it was a punishment at school. Cross country was just short, you know, quick bursts of exercise. You know, I used to love like the 100-meter run, but I'll tell you, said he loved it. Oh, you know, cross country, you'd have me running a mile just not to do it. You know, it's
ironic.
Yeah, ironically. But there's certain exercises which have really helped me, like sort of strength training, yoga and Pilates, and actually swimming. Now, some asthmatics say that swimming they struggle with, whereas for me, the sort of the warm, moist air, I actually felt was much better for me. It is a bit of trial and error. I mean, I'd go and do lots of asthma talks for Asthma UK, which is, you know, the biggest charity in the UK, and you'll quite often get other people talking about their own experiences at the end, and everybody's just so different. Everyone's just so different.
Absolutely. Everybody who's got asthma in the UK should be having an annual asthma review with a specialised asthma nurse.
Yeah.
And these are great conversations. Our specialist nurses, okay, so let me talk to you about them for a minute, because as GPs, they are our saviours. They are fantastic at helping us deal with chronic diseases, type 2 diabetes, asthma, COPD, these kind of things. And a lot of the work that we do, we couldn't, you know, our GP practices would be crushed under the weight of these reviews that need to be done on an annual basis. And your asthma nurse, if you're an asthmatic, is somebody who, you know, you should be having a really good relationship with and getting a review on an annual basis. There was a few years ago, there was a study came out of how it was quite critical of how we manage asthma within the UK. And one of the things we found in that study was that it wasn't people, I mean, unfortunately, people die of asthma. It's a really severe condition, but it wasn't people like yourself who had severe and brittle asthma that were tending to die of their asthma. It was people who had normally very, very well controlled asthma and were probably completely disengaged from their doctors, weren't getting their inhalers, and they were just, you know, trying to push it as hard as they could in order to get that, you know, because they thought, oh, my asthma is really good. And actually those are the people who ended up presenting really, really late to hospital and ended up actually dying of their asthma. If you have a severe brittle asthma, you know to get on the phone pretty soon when you're starting to lose control of your symptoms. But one of the great things and so as a result of that, one of the great things our asthma nurses do is every year go through a plan of action with you in order to help you make a plan for knowing when you should be calling the doctor about your asthma, or calling the ambulance about your asthma.
And it's about management, and do you know what, I can absolutely vouch for this in terms of you do push it, and I did. I mean, thank goodness one day that my grandma was actually in the house, and I said I'm fine, and if she hadn't have called the hospital and called an ambulance when she did, I don't know what necessarily would have happened, because before I knew it, I was in intensive care on a ventilator, and you know, it can be a matter of minutes and seconds, you know, but it is about not slipping, and it's quite easy. We've all done it. I mean, we even do it with antibiotics. I know I've done it. You know, you start a course, you start to feel a bit better, and you don't finish it, when actually you really should be doing, you know, or whatever it may be. You know, with my inhalers in the past, not so flippant about it now, obviously, but I'm sure you will have had this at home, where, you know, I feel okay. I'm going to stop taking my preventer. I'm not talking about, you know, your everyday, your reliever, but something that you should be maybe taking once in the morning, once a night, or however many times it may be. And you think, actually, I don't need it. And then your symptoms start to come back, and then it's like, oh, I'm going to jump back on it again. But you know, we've got to remember that sometimes the reason you're not getting symptoms is because it is under control. And that's why we've got to keep it up.
And we always try and keep people on the lowest dose of medication for asthma that is needed to control their symptoms, and we're always trying to step people down to the lowest dose, because when you're on steroids, the brown or the preventer inhalers that we get are inhaled steroids.
Yeah.
That's not something we put people on lightly, and that's not something we want to keep people on unless they really, really need it. So we're always trying to step down medication, but it's always worth doing under doctor supervision rather than doing it yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. But brilliant. Thank you so much to Lindsay for getting in touch with that question there. So moving on to something completely separate here, and actually this is really interesting. So Caroline is asking, is bird flu still a danger? Can you explain to me what bird flu is?
Bird flu?
Yes, yeah.
Is flu in birds.
Okay, so funnily
yeah,
enough.
No, absolutely.
But what are the actual, so
okay,
how does it vary from
sorry, that was a very bad answer.
No, but it's what it says on the tin, Poppy.
Yeah, it literally is what it says on the tin. And so bird flu is, so what is bird flu still a concern? So bird flu has been pretty disastrous for large flocks of birds, and actually has been a problem in various places throughout the world. And it's basically that passes from bird to bird in most circumstances, okay? So, and there's been several different strains that have gone around, and a lot of those strains have been pretty deadly, and they've had like a 70-80% mortality rate. Any birds have got it. Now, if you've got a chicken farm or something like that, then that can be a really bad thing. So, is bird flu a danger to humans? There have been some recorded cases of avian or bird flu crossing over to humans. Okay. Now, so far, these have been people who have been working very, very closely with birds. So they've been people who've worked in factories, in battery operations of hen farming and things like that. And actually, a lot of those people have died as well. So it's been very, very bad when it's happened and crossed from species to humans. Okay, so yes, this is a big problem. What has been fortunate so far, obviously it's unfortunate that some people have lost their lives, but it hasn't been much human-to-human transmission with avian flu. So if somebody's caught it from a bird, it's been very difficult to pass it on. And actually, the only cases we've got of people passing it on have been really close relationships. I think there was a case where there was a mother and child both got it. I think the mum got it from the child or something like that.
Okay.
And so we haven't had an easy transmission from people to people. But is avian flu potentially a danger? If it starts to, I'm not trying to scaremonger here, by the way. If it does start to easily transmit from person to person, yeah, we've got a big problem.
Then we've got a problem.
We've got a really, really big problem, because this just isn't something that our immune systems are built to encounter. It could be terrible if that happens, which is why people are so passionate about getting plans in place for it, okay? Last year, I remember, so I've got a couple of chickens at home, and one of the things we think about is DEFRA. So DEFRA, the government agency, put in place a plan to stop wild birds and birds in captivity, like chickens and that, becoming into contact with each other. So you have to net over your chickens. Now we've only got 2 chickens, but obviously, can you imagine, wild birds transmitting it around from one big poultry farm where there may be an outbreak of bird flu to another poultry farm, to the chickens in your back garden. And so, we have to take this kind of stuff seriously when it happens, because if we don't, it could be potentially really, really bad. There's a kind of a parallel with antibiotics. We have to be really, really careful with who we give antibiotics to, because we don't want to lose the power of that drug.
Of course.
Okay? And do you know what? It's a real shame, but we're still, and there's been a big push in the media and stuff about this recently, about, not hassling your doctor if they don't give you antibiotics. It's a really difficult thing.
Of course.
I know I've gone off on a real tangent
here,
but
this is the beauty
really,
of this, we can talk,
really important that you trust your doctor to make the right call. You can always go and get a second opinion, but please don't if your doctor has a good reason for not giving you antibiotics, they're never going to deny you antibiotics when they think you need them. No doctor is ever going to do that. I hope they're not going to do that, okay? But unfortunately, we still get people who are really, really demanding. Really, really demanding, and it's very, very difficult because you get a breakdown in your doctor-patient relationship then, and it's a tendency of wanting to give it to keep someone happy so that you have a good relationship. With doctor-patient relationships, everything, you need to have good engagement between people. Trust. If you came into me and you thought you needed antibiotics and I didn't give you antibiotics, you'd be like, I don't like Dr. Mags, I'm not going to go and see him again, and
we wouldn't say that here.
And potentially hate all doctors.
Yeah.
And actually, when you then have something significantly wrong with you, you might be still in that phase of, no, doctors are idiots and all this kind of stuff, because that time Dr. Mags didn't give me antibiotics.
No,
but you can see how the relationship breaks down.
Of course.
And it's a real concern for doctors that they don't want the relationship to break down. But we also have to really, really get that message out there. Just please, by all means seek a second opinion, but don't hassle your doctor. If they're not doing it because they are trying to give you a hard time, they're giving it because they are trying to protect the ability of those antibiotics to treat people when they really, really need them. We have a lot of antibiotic resistance around at the moment, and it's only going to get worse if we continue to give antibiotics inappropriately.
It is difficult though, isn't it? Because at the end of the day, I mean, doctors do have our health as at their, as their best interest. It's at the heart of what they do. It's why you studied as long as you did, and you care about our health and you care about people, and there can be that breakdown in relationships of patient-doctor quite often, and I think this is a big thing as well, that we talk about here. It's a combination of us both taking a responsibility. A patient can't just come and expect to, have medication thrown at them. We talk about there's not a pill for everything. We need to look after ourselves. But in the same respect, you're not saying don't go to your doctor. By all means, please go and seek medical help where you need to. But just please remember that we're also trying to protect you from building up this immunity, and we prescribe as we believe, as we feel fit. Because we know, interestingly, there's obviously adverts now about painkillers. About don't always reach for painkillers, because ultimately you'll end up building an immunity, and it's not good to take loads of painkillers. For some it can cause addiction. So it's interesting, and it's lovely to hear that, because our doctors do care and are trying to help. So it's nice to hear that we need a bit of understanding sometimes. So thank you for that. So that's about bird flu, and so thank you to Caroline as well. Okay, so this message is coming through from Francis. Oh, Elliot, this is a good one for you actually. This is Elliot. Elliot suffers from back problems. I'm a mother of 2 toddlers with a bad back. I'm often lifting them, which is unavoidable. Understandably so. My doctor has said it's a trapped nerve, but I suffer from pain almost consistently and want to know what else I can do to help with this pain. Okay, right. So, really difficult situation, because obviously you've been to your doctor. Yeah, this is... And you've thought it's a trapped nerve, and I think this is one of the difficulties about doing this kind of show, is actually, it would be really useful to examine and find out if there's any weakness within the kind of the lower legs, which is one of the signs of a trapped nerve. And how is that trapped nerve preventing? Do you need a scan for it? Do you need to be just taking some time? How long has this been going on? So there's all sorts of different issues here, really. Sometimes, so what happens? Why do nerves get trapped? Okay, so spinal column is lots of vertebrae stacked on top of each other, and that we need to get some of those. We're going to need my anatomy thing. Do you know what, here, Doctor? I knew you were about to say this, because you're brilliant with coming in with props, and I was like, I guarantee you're about to say we need to get some. I could see it.
Absolutely, or maybe some graphics to go over the top of the screen.
We can work together to get some stuff for screen.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I'd love to be able to show you. So what you've got is stacked on top of each other with a cushion in between. Okay, and sometimes that cushion, something goes wrong with that cushion. It's a disc, okay, and sometimes you may have heard about a herniated disc, and a herniated disc is when something's gone wrong with that. Usually it's got a bit dehydrated as it ages, they do, and a bit of something squeezes out the side, and when it squeezes out the side it can press on something, and that is exactly where the nerve roots come out of your spine. And sometimes it just lightly presses against that, sometimes it really squeezes hard, and sometimes you can get long-term nerve damage as a result of that. So it's really, really difficult to give very, very specific advice in this situation. But if we're just talking about back pain generally, you know, so much of what we talk about here is prevention and exercise and things like that. Having a strong back and exercising in the correct way is going to really, really help you. And for many people who are suffering with back pain, like the lady who wrote in, then it can be a really good idea to get a referral for your physiotherapist if your doctor feels it's appropriate in that case, okay? But you know, she talks about lifting her children. Yeah, it is unavoidable, and this is one of the difficulties of medicine. We don't live in a bubble. You know, we can't just say, you know, don't lift your children, because it's clearly not going to happen. And you know, so what we need to be doing is kind of looking at ways in which you can lift them safely, or deal with that kind of situation more safely. It's not all about painkillers.
No. Back
pain, you know, we know that certainly painkillers have their roles, but like we were saying in the last one, they can be addictive, and especially, you know, our morphine-based painkillers and stuff. There's huge problems with addiction, and actually we know that people who have painkiller addictions and are on ever higher doses of morphine, it doesn't really help them, because after a while the actual thing that's causing the pain gets better. And all pain is experienced in our brains. Okay, we have a stimulus from our nervous system to say, ouch, I've broken my ankle. But you know, 6 months later, when those bones have healed, most people stop feeling that pain. Some people carry on feeling that pain. But it's not because there's a problem in that area anymore. It's because there's something going on regarding how you're perceiving that pain, and that's really, really complicated, and that's chronic pain for you. Okay? Chronic pain is a complex relationship between which goes on in your brain, and we know that things like stress and anxiety can make that worse, and you know, so many things around it. So you know, it's very rare that pain that's lasting after about 3 to 4 months is actually a pain that is caused by something that's still going wrong in the tissue itself, because most tissues have healed by that stage.
Really intrigued about what you were talking about. You know, essentially it's like the signals being sent up to the brain, and there are certain contributing factors. You know, if you feel under the weather, or you don't feel as happy as you perhaps normally would do, then a pain that you didn't, you know, it didn't just turn up. You had it previously, but it's not exaggerated, it's not the right word, but it's you feel that pain stronger than you perhaps normally would. Just, it's like, you know, the natural antidote. You know, happiness, sometimes you perhaps feel, it's almost like forgetting about it, you know, and I felt this too, you know, feeling happier, certain aches and pains, I'm like, oh, they're gone. Okay, they're not actually gone, I just feel a bit better about them today. But it's interesting how the brain works.
Yeah,
it's very complex.
Pain is experienced in the brain.
Wow, yeah.
Not you know, there's certain, you know, obviously if you poke yourself in the hand, you know, you can feel the pain there, but actually it's your sensations within your brain.
Your brain's saying that that's happening. So we've got another question here that's related to pain. Joanne from Huddersfield, thank you, Joanne. So Joanne's 56. She says, I work in an office doing admin and constantly suffer with wrist and shoulder pains in my right hand side. I'm guessing that's probably then because she's saying she's right-handed. What would you suggest I could do to improve an RSI? So first of all, what is RSI?
Okay, so RSI stands for repetitive strain injury.
Okay.
And again, that's what it says on the tin. So you're doing the same movement over and over again. If you're right-handed and you're office-based, I'm guessing it may be something to do with computers and mice and things like that, potentially, or potentially some other repetitive task at work. It's really, really difficult, because one of the things we would want you to be thinking about doing is not doing the thing that's causing it. But if you're at work and you'll use your right hand for typing in for the mouse, then what are we going to do really? So, yeah, very difficult situation. So pretty much every employers above a certain size have an obligation to put in some sort of occupational health to their employees and look after them, do risk assessments, so hopefully they don't get these kind of things in the first place, but that they actually may have adjustments made. And the specialists that come in, and it might be looking at your chair position, it might be looking at switching hands with the mouse if that's possible, that you might be able to do that, or maybe using a trackpad instead. Sometimes you'll see people with these gel things in front of the keyboards, wrist strains. Obviously go and see your doctor to see, or some areas you can self-refer to a physiotherapist in order to potentially get some advice about getting the thing. I'm assuming you've had a diagnosed repetitive strain injury here and that we're not dealing with something else, but actually maybe your doctor can refer you on to a physiotherapist. Your doctor may be able to advise you about some specific potential painkillers that might be able to help you. Potentially you may benefit from anti-inflammatories, to take some anti-inflammatory, some of the inflammation down. That may be a tablet, that may be like a gel or a rub or something like that. And other simple things like ice. Okay, ice can be a really good one. You can get these gel packs now that do the same job as a bag of peas, which is far less messy. I did once leave a bag of peas all over the floor of letter A&E when I broke my wrist.
Left a trail.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing. If you've only got a bag of peas that's already open in your freezer,
that's what you'll go for.
Then that's what you'll go for when you've broken your wrist skateboarding on New Year's Day in 2003.
Oh wow.
Yeah. It's the second time that's come up in conversation
today. We spoke about this earlier today, didn't we?
So yeah, trailer peas everywhere. But you can, ice is really, really good for just taking inflammation down and stuff. So there are multiple things you can do.
Yeah, we had a risk assessment here actually, and we had to sign a detailed document, just basically saying, are you sitting at a desk which you feel is large enough to, support all the stuff that you've got on it? Is your computer at the right position? Like you say, lots of employers will have or should have a duty of care to their employees. So it's worth perhaps maybe even speaking to somebody, one of your managers. HR might be someone to go to, not to make a complaint, but just basically just say, look, I'm struggling a little bit. Can I get a particular keyboard, or can I move, this or this?
Yeah, and sometimes they'll bring someone in from outside to actually help you with that scenario. Yeah,
there's people that actually are employed to look at stuff like this, really.
Yeah, absolutely.
So hopefully that gets sorted for you, Joanne, as well, because I know it's a pain, really.
It can be really frustrating because sometimes these injuries can take a long time to get better, and especially if you're still carrying on doing the same thing day after day.
That's it. Yeah. You're not even allowing your body to rest from it, because it just always, sometimes it can even be that really dull, annoying ache, can't it?
Absolutely,
that's just,
and sometimes really shooting pains and things like that.
Yeah. Well, actually, Elliot and I were talking about this when this question came through earlier. So our director and myself, we used to work together previously on another channel, and I'd have to, so I worked for a jewellery channel previously, and you'd have to put your hand in shot so the camera could see it, and you'd have to hold your hand in a certain way that actually would send shooting pains at, you'd hold sort of the ring or the piece of jewellery, and you'd have your thumb behind to move it like this, sort of twiddle it around, honestly, so you could sort of see the gemstone, and I would get pains from my finger sort of up my arm, and it would happen to other presenters as well, and that was just repetitive. 5 hours sat on air one time doing this one particular movement that you wouldn't normally do, and as a result you got this really dull, annoying ache. It's the same sort of thing, but I do hope that improves for you, Joanne. Now, someone else has asked, well, we're going back to flu, but in a different way this time. So Darren is 31 and asking about, should I be getting the flu jab?
Okay, so good question, Darren. Flu is rubbish. I often, a bit of a bugbear when people say, "Oh, I think I've got the flu," and they're at work or something like that. One of the things I always say is, how do you know if you've got the flu or a cold? Or if you won the lottery ticket and you and you just got you just found out you got the winning lottery ticket and you got a cold, you'd be celebrating, okay? If you found out that you got the winning lottery ticket and you got the flu, you'd probably just roll over and go back to sleep.
Yeah.
Because that's how terrible the flu makes you feel.
Good analogy.
I had flu earlier this year, and basically February disappeared for me. I was in bed for a couple of weeks and recovering for a couple of weeks after that. So yeah, I can understand why Darren may wish to try and avoid getting the flu. So in the UK, the flu jab is available free on the NHS for people over the age of 65. Basically anybody who's in an at-risk group, okay? So that will include people like myself, who, as a healthcare professional, someone like Poppy, who is an asthmatic, who clearly we don't want to be getting someone with a diagnosed severe lung disease to be getting the flu, children under a certain age, pregnant women, and there's a few other smaller groups as well. But, so Darren, I'm assuming you're not someone who is eligible for a flu jab on the NHS, unless you've got something like asthma, which you will have been offered it anyway. So as a 31-year-old who is potentially healthy, should you be getting it? It's up to you. It's up to you. So the reason why the government doesn't offer is you're not felt to be in an at-risk group, someone who is going to make their health to a point where you might have to go into hospital or something like that. Whether you want to go and do it, you can usually get it done at your a local pharmacy. They'll go and do that for you, but it's totally up to you really. Having had the flu, I can understand why people would want to go and pay for it themselves, and actually, I think it would be my personal choice to do so, but actually, it really is down to individual choice here. Hopefully that's been an explanation of why we give it to certain groups and not to others. It's very different from things like the childhood vaccinations. Yes, we give them so the individual prevent the individual, but we're also trying to immunise pretty much the entire population, so there's horrific illnesses, and I think people have forgotten how bad things like measles and rubella and that were, and mumps of course. So that the vast majority we get something called herd immunity, where pretty much everybody is immune to it. So there's just diseases we just forget that they've happened. And to be honest, I'm very passionate about vaccinations because it's so important. And it's really upsetting when you see someone, a child with measles and something like that, which you think this is so preventable. If people had the vaccinations, and we're starting to see it. Last year we started to see an upswing in the number of measles cases.
Really?
And you're thinking this really shouldn't be happening. This is something that there's a program in place for. I know some people are passionate about the opposite argument, but it's just no.
Yeah.
Just no for me, I'm afraid.
So would your doctor, you mentioned that if you're at risk or if you're over a certain age, then you are, or you were offered it at least, would your doctor let you know then? So say you're under the age, what was it, 65, sorry?
Yeah, over the age of 65, so or certain health conditions, or if you're a healthcare worker, it's usual that your employer will offer that to you. GPs, they are, this is a set target for GPs. They are paid on the number of people they get vaccinated. Most GP surgeries will be making contact with you if you're eligible, potentially even ringing you up, sending you text messages.
Yeah, I get letters.
Letters, depending on how you're, how you are, you signed up for your thing with the GDPR and all that kind of thing about can they email you and that. So yes, they will probably be getting in touch with you, and if not, it's probably because you've opted out of receiving messages from them.
Got it. But it is true. I mean, Darren, I'm sure we can all vouch for having flu at one point or another, but it just totally floors you. And like you said, funny enough, we were having this conversation again behind the scenes. Sean, who's head of research here, was saying, you know, people say, oh, I've got flu. It's like, oh, if you've got flu, you will know it. You can't. My boyfriend's had it recently and literally couldn't get out of bed. You know, it was the first time that I'd come home and he didn't come to the door. So normally comes, you know, whoever comes in first, it's just a normal, oh, you know, hi, and you know, he was nowhere to be seen. And it was a bit like, whoa. And I came around and he could barely speak. He could barely speak. And it is quite, you know, it's quite concerning, but actually flu really can be that bad. Flu can really be that bad. So we've got a message now that's come through this is from Lucy. So my 6-year-old often comes back from school with coughs and colds. So we've gone from sort of flu to coughs and colds, which are also horrendous, which I 9 times out of 10 get myself. How can I reduce the risk for both of us? How would you do that?
It's a really common frustration at this time of year because it's, I believe you me,
they're everywhere.
Yeah, they are everywhere, and it's very frustrating because especially if you've got young children at school, they're all mixing with loads of other people who've got coughs and colds, and yeah, they will bring them home and then they will pass them on to your other children and then they will pass them on to you. And so yes, I see where you're coming from with this question. So part of it is just generally looking after yourself, eating a healthy diet, getting enough sleep, and making sure your own immunity is really, really important. It's stuff we talk about all the time on here. Make sure you're getting enough exercise. All these things have an influence on the strength of your immune system. But the number one thing you can probably do is, you know, basic hygiene stuff. So hand washing, encouraging the kids to wash their hands properly, good 20 seconds. There's some great instructional videos on YouTube of, you know, proper hand washing and things like that, in terms of getting in all the crevices and
seemingly little things, but actually so important.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, we forget something we take so much for granted and things like that, but you know, soap and hand hygiene, or, you know, non-soapy, pumpy things, you know, they're really, really important. If you're not got those available, then the alcohol gels, which are in the portable things, you can keep in
little ones like this, so you can just carry around in your pocket. Yeah.
So really, really important, especially during kind of cold and flu season, just to be making sure your hand hygiene's in place. Also, you know, coughs and sneezes, making sure you know, not just coughing into wide open spaces rather than coughing into a tissue or something like that.
Yeah, be nice and considerate as well. In terms of spreading it. And then I suppose also, you know, taking vitamins and so on. If you know, obviously you should be getting, you know, lots of minerals and nutrients from your diet. So you've, you know, referenced before about eating well, but we also do vitamins here. Vitamin C, obviously, I think arguably the most well-known one for, you know, looking after your immune system, and also we can't retain vitamin C. It's water soluble, so I mean that's one that I live by personally. I love my vitamin C, especially the ones we do here that taste really nice. So thank you for that one. Okay, lovely. Now, we've actually got one sort of talking about mental wellness here. So Margaret's asking, how can I tell if someone has a mental health problem? So I guess maybe looking at the signs, is it?
Yeah. Okay. Really, really, you know, sometimes this can be something that's obviously really, really obvious. I mean, as you can imagine, in my line of work, I see the full spectrum of mental health illnesses, from people who are florid psychosis and are clearly deranged from reality, and you know, very obviously so, but right through, and those are the easy ones to spot because you know, they're really, really obvious. However, I think it's the other end of the spectrum we're probably getting at here, in terms of, you know, the more subtle signs that somebody is suffering with a mental health illness, and actually it can be really tricky. Be really, really tricky to actually find out. First thing is, you know, to have a chat with them and have a conversation. That would be, you know, and you're looking for clues, and actually sometimes people want to talk about these things, and actually giving them a safe space to talk about them, you know, with a trusted friend, relative, colleague, can be really, really good. And so actually that might be one way to approach this situation if you're worried about someone. So more subtle signs, we start to talk about people's things like concentration. So is somebody struggling with their concentration? You know, maybe this is a work colleague or something that you're worried about. Are they struggling with their daily tasks and things like that? Are they always tired? Because one of the first things that go when you have, you know, either stress or anxiety or, you know, depression is your sleep. Are they losing weight? They may be, you know, not eating properly. Do they smell of alcohol? Are they starting to, you know, use alcohol? You know, it can be quite obvious that somebody's been drinking during the day and things like that. Have they started smoking? Are they neglecting their appearance in ways? Are they changing their appearance? So, you know, all sorts of things like that. Are they becoming easily tearful? Sometimes when people get really bad with depression, they actually start to physically move slower.
Really?
Yeah,
so I suppose it makes sense, really, doesn't it? Yeah.
And, you know, just not carrying themselves in the way. I mean, I think you're obviously worried about someone if you're asking that question here. I'd really encourage you to take action and try and address that with that person if you feel that's the right thing to do. Because sometimes people just want someone to talk to and to feel that somebody's noticing their situation. It can be really good, really important.
It's amazing the difference, actually. I mean, the saying goes, you know, problem shared is a problem halved. And actually, we're not saying that's the answer to everyone's problems and that it's the ultimate fix. But it is amazing the difference that just speaking to somebody can actually have. And sometimes you don't even realise, if you're being the person that's being spoken to or allowing them that safe space, what a huge difference it can make. It is. I mean, it is quite something. I mean, we had Anna Pinkerton in earlier, who's an amazing psychotherapist that specialises in something called burnout, or avoiding it at least. And this is, you know, she was saying that Anna was talking about, look, you know, yes, we all get stressed at some point, and we all perhaps may even suffer, you know, small spots of anxiety or something, specific situations, but it's that consistent feeling of stress or anxiety and the effects that it has on our body and our minds, ultimately leading you to that point known as burnout, which is just, of course you don't want to be, and then you essentially maybe lose the person that you were before. I'm not saying that you can't regain that, but you're perhaps less, you know, if you sense that somebody's not being how they used to be, you know, perhaps watch out for those signs, you know, like you've said. So we perhaps only have time maybe for one more question here. Okay, so with just a few minutes left, what do I do if my colleague has an epileptic fit? And that's from Julie.
Right, okay. This is okay, right, so I'm guessing from the situation that you've got a colleague, you know, in your workplace who is known to have epilepsy. They may have had a seizure in the past, and you're worried about, you know, how you might deal with that situation. It's great that you're asking this question, and great that you're engaging with this, you know, this situation rather than just ignoring it. So, fantastic. So, what can you do? So, first of all, when someone has an epileptic seizure, there's a few different types, but one of the most common types is like a full, what we call a tonic-clonic or a grand mal seizure, where you typically get eyes rolling back, some frothing at the mouth, the body goes entirely rigid, and sometimes you get some shaking and some jerking. Okay, it can be really, really difficult to actually move someone in those situations, but the first thing is to try and keep them safe. And actually, you know, so stopping their head banging, things like that. And actually, of course, calling for help in that situation. Make sure, you know, unless they've got a clear plan where they are someone who's having seizures on a regular basis and they may not need an ambulance calling, get the ambulance called, because this is, you know, something that sometimes seizures don't stop. And that's when we need to be giving medications to actually help the body stop seizing. Very, very difficult situation, but get that 999 called. The next thing is, usually when it's stopped, people are going to be a little bit confused and a bit muddled after a seizure. Okay, so you ideally want to be getting them into the recovery position. So, and then hopefully you're going to get some help arriving, and it can take, you know, 20 minutes, half an hour for them to really come round, so they expect them to be a little bit confused. These kind of things are often covered in basic training, and in terms of getting some basic life support training within your workplace. So especially if you've got a colleague that you're worried about, then yeah, please maybe have a chat with your bosses about getting some extra training in.
Fantastic, yeah. So I mean, health and safety training is very, very important, and you know, something that we've done here. Actually, did our health and safety training, Elliot? Was it Luke that went on it? Luke in our office, yeah. So it's, you know, it's to have somebody there that in that particular circumstance would be able to help. So you know, make sure the area is safe, and also speak. You know, speak to them. You know, no one knows their epilepsy better than they know themselves. So amazing questions that we've had come through. Thank you ever so much, and thank you, Dr. Dan. So informative and so interesting as well. If you'd like to get your questions in, I say if, you definitely will, please get those questions in. Just all you have to do is go to our website, primalcure.com. Go down to Ask the Doctor and get your questions in, lifestyle related questions that you can have answered here by Dr. Dan or Dr. Shan. Monday, 6 p.m. is when you can tune in to see those questions answered. And we've had a real array today from flu to RSI, coughs and colds, stop smoking and so on. So again, yeah, thank you so much. Get those questions in, and we look forward to you joining us for the next Ask the Doctor.
Thank you.